The courtroom was heavy with silence, the kind of silence that makes even the sound of breathing echo. A weary man stood at the front, his hands rough from years of labor, his shoulders sagging under the weight of false accusations. His name was John, a father who had spent his life sacrificing for his only daughter. Across from him sat the prosecutor, papers neatly stacked, ready to strip away what little dignity John had left. Reporters waited with pens poised, eager for a headline. The judge, stern and unreadable, adjusted his glasses and prepared to give John's fate. But then, something happened that no one could have predicted. From the back of the courtroom, a small voice rose, steady and clear. A little girl, no older than 10, walked forward with trembling steps and a battered notebook clutched tightly in her tiny hands. Her name was Chloe. With courage that seemed larger than her small frame, she stood before the judge, looked him in the eye, and said words that shook the entire room, "Your Honor. I'm my dad's lawyer." For a moment, time stopped. Whispers rippled across the benches, the prosecutor shifted uncomfortably, and even the judge leaned back in surprise. A child had just declared herself an attorney in a courtroom meant for professionals. But Chloe wasn't joking. She wasn't playing. She was fighting, for her father, for the man who had fought his whole life for her. Sparkles, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of love, please take a second to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to Kindness Tales. Your support helps us spread stories that remind the world that love and kindness still exist. Chloe had not lived the kind of childhood filled with toys, parties, and carefree days. Instead, her world revolved around her father's endless struggle to keep them afloat. John had raised her alone ever since her mother walked out when Chloe was only 5. The pain of abandonment still lingered, but John never allowed it to define their lives. He worked 2 jobs, days as a construction worker under the burning sun and nights as a janitor in a nearby school. His back ached, his hands blistered, but every night, he came home with a tired smile just to whisper to Chloe, "You are my reason. You are why I fight." To Chloe, her dad wasn't just a parent. He was her hero, her entire world. She knew he skipped meals so she could eat, patched her shoes instead of buying new ones, and sang to her when nightmares crept in. Life was harsh, but love made it bearable. Until one day, that love was threatened. John was accused of stealing money from his workplace. He swore he hadn't taken anything, but being poor in America often means your voice is drowned out by assumptions. His co-workers whispered, his employer looked at him with suspicion, and soon, he was dragged into court facing charges that could send him to prison. To everyone else, he was just another desperate man who might have crossed the line. But to Chloe, he was innocence itself, a man who never once broke his promise to care for her. The night before the hearing, John sat slumped in their small apartment, his calloused hands trembling as he covered his face. Chloe saw the hopelessness in his eyes, the same eyes that once promised her the world. She couldn't sleep. Instead, she pulled out every book she had borrowed from the library. Law books, storybooks about justice, anything that explained right from wrong. Her small fingers flipped through the pages, scribbling notes in her notebook. She practiced standing tall in front of the mirror, rehearsing words she barely understood but believed with her whole heart. She wasn't preparing for a future career. She was preparing for tomorrow. For her father's freedom. When the day came, the courtroom felt like a giant swallowing her whole. She watched as the prosecutor painted John as a man broken by poverty, a man who chose crime as an escape. John's lawyer muttered weak arguments, barely lifting his head. John himself seemed defeated, as though he had already lost. That was the moment Chloe's heart could no longer stay silent. She stood up, clutched her notebook, and declared herself her father's lawyer. The judge, stunned but intrigued, allowed her to speak. Chloe's voice trembled at first, but as she flipped through her notes, it grew stronger. She didn't talk in legal terms or cite complicated laws. Instead, she told stories, raw, honest, and filled with truth. She spoke of nights her father went hungry so she could eat, of mornings he left before dawn and returned long after sunset, of the way his hands were proof of labor, not theft. She turned to the prosecutor, her eyes fierce despite the tears brimming in them, and asked, "If my dad stole, then why does he come home every night with nothing but sore hands and tired eyes? Why would he sacrifice everything for me, only to throw it away for money he never even touched?" The courtroom was no longer cold and indifferent. It was filled with the warmth of Chloe's words. Reporters lowered their pens, the audience leaned forward, and even Judge Williams, known for his sternness, softened as he listened. Chloe's closing words pierced every heart in the room. "I may not be a real lawyer, but I know the truth. My dad is not a thief. He is my hero. And I will not let anyone take him away from me." Silence followed, but it was a silence charged with emotion. John was sobbing openly, his face buried in his hands. The judge cleared his throat, visibly moved, and asked the prosecution for stronger evidence than suspicion. None came. The testimonies crumbled under scrutiny. With a firm voice, the judge dismissed all charges. The gavel struck, and in that instant, John was free. The courtroom erupted in whispers, some clapping quietly, others wiping away tears. John rushed forward, scooping Chloe into his arms. His body shook as he whispered, "You saved me." Chloe held him tighter, her voice muffled against his chest, "No, Daddy. You saved me every day." Word of Chloe's bravery spread far beyond the courtroom. Local newspapers called her the little lawyer, and soon national media picked up the story. Strangers sent donations, communities rallied around John, and job offers poured in from people touched by their story. For the first time in years, John and Chloe no longer lived with the fear of eviction or hunger. But more important than the money or the fame was the dignity they regained. John stood taller, no longer crushed by the world's judgment. Chloe, though still a child, became a symbol of courage and love. Whenever people asked her why she stood up that day, she simply smiled and said, "Because sometimes the truth needs a louder voice. And I wanted to make sure they heard mine." Life wasn't magically perfect afterward. Bills still needed paying, challenges still arrived at their door. But now, there was hope, hope born out of love, courage, and the bond between a father and his daughter. John promised Chloe that if she ever wanted to be a real lawyer one day, he would do everything to help her. Chloe giggled and said, "I only needed to be a lawyer once, for you." If this story touched your heart, please like, share, comment, and subscribe to Kindness Tales. Every time you engage, you help us bring more stories of hope and second chances to people who need them. Comment the words, "Love never gives up," below if you believe Chloe's courage is proof that love is stronger than any courtroom, any judgment, any hardship. Because in the end, this wasn't just about winning a case. It was about proving that when love speaks, the whole world listens.